Joining us right now is a guy who knows very well what it's like to talk all day long with Brian Wilson. His former roommate over there at Fox News, James Rosen, the chief Washington correspondent. Hey, James.
Larry, great to be with you. And boy, this is I don't know if the word is ironic, but this is incredible because in Susan Ferricchio, we have the better half of the person who now occupies the chair that Brian Wilson used to occupy in that office with me, my Fox News colleague Doug McKelway. So this is sort of all in the family this morning.
And you get the office to yourself today, James, because Doug has the day off. So you can just spread out, put your feet up on
Clearly
his chair.
He and Wilson are out fishing or something.
Yeah, we're not. In fact, we're not going to speculate what Doug's going to spend his day doing.
All right. Well, let's get to the news of the week. And James, what a week it has been. Let's start with the horrible, barbaric treatment of James Foley that I think shocked the world. The president's reaction, Eric Holder starting a criminal investigation, and Chuck Hagel's statements yesterday saying that really this is something that we've never dealt with before, had no idea that they were as big as they are. What's the assessment right now about ISIS and what the U.S. is, or if they can do anything about it?
Well, of course, we begin with condolences for the Foley family who handled themselves so well and so classily in the face of this atrocity. This is, in fact, something we have dealt with before, and the Foley tape is, all too reminiscent of the Daniel Pearl killing. The nature of the enemy has been clear for some time. The manifestation of it in the form of ISIS is new, and what's new about ISIS, first of all, is that they're multi-state. Second of all, that they have an extraordinary amount of cash, more than any terrorist group ever has.
Don't they have like $2 billion, James, at least?
It varies because they took over the central bank in Mosul in Iraq when they seized that city in June. And the estimates of how much how much their windfall was when they did that has varied from the hundreds of millions to $4 billion.
Wow.
But clearly they have a lot of cash. And they're really an organized army. They're not just a terrorist group anymore. What strikes me about the Obama administration's approach to ISIS is that from the commander-in-chief down the line, we've heard them emphasize two messages about this. The first is that they speak of containment. They want to contain ISIS. And to students of foreign policy and Cold War history, they know that term containment refers to a kind of managed coexistence with a strategic rival or enemy, and it signals that the United States policy is not one of total war against that entity. The second thing that I hear coming out of the administration is that the policymakers invariably tell us the key to long-term strategy against ISIS is to strengthen the Iraqis, in essence, to take care of the job themselves. And it suggests not only a limited mission on the part of the United States against ISIS, all in all, I think it reflects a foreign policy outlook on the part of the president that is almost at all points very sparing, if not to say ill at ease, with the projection of U.S. military power. In his own mind, it seems safe to say he came to this office to get America out of wars, not into them, and he's standing by that.
But James, I've heard a lot of criticism of that kind of policy because people say in order to really stop what's happening, you have to get rid of the Islamic State terrorists, and this idea of just containing them is just it just doesn't make any sense.
Senator McCain was on Fox News Channel yesterday. Just asking why we're talking about containment and not talking about defeating this enemy. The president himself, in his remarks from Martha's Vineyard, has stated explicitly that ISIS threatens not just Iraq but the entire Middle East. And the president obviously knows the enormous interest the United States has across the Middle East. And it does beg the question of if our interests are so centrally at stake in that region with this group, why is our policy or our approach to them, our strategic objective, so limited? And
James Rosen, let's turn to that statement from Martha's Vineyard that the president made in the middle of the week, because you don't want to inject politics into a tragedy like this, but we're in Washington D.C. and politics seems to get injected into what hamburger you pick at a restaurant. The fact is, a lot of people, including people in the president's own party or political affiliation, have criticized not just the tone of the statement, but then the optics of going and golfing on vacation immediately afterwards, and those images of him laughing while the Foley family was giving their press conference. Have you noticed the reaction here, especially from members of his own party, that seem quite critical of the president?
Well, there's no question that this has attracted a lot of attention, the fact that he wasn't wearing a tie when discussing this gruesome event and the fact that he elected to give his statement, I think, while the Foleys themselves were still giving theirs, and then went off to play golf. Look, White House officials are saying this morning that his concern for the Foley family was quite evident in his emotional remarks, and that presidents, as a matter of necessity, must compartmentalize their activities and their emotions. Still, the president is 6 years into this, and he knows how the game of optics works in Washington, and probably could have foreseen that this kind of criticism would arise. And to the extent that that's true, it suggests he doesn't care about it.
Yeah, James, you've covered the White House for a long time, and you're seeing the media coverage right now of the president golfing and the juxtaposition of him with his big smile on the golf course and what's happening. What do you think his aides are telling him right now? Do you think they're saying, hey, look, this doesn't look very good, let's cut back on the golf? Or do you think that he's just, not that they're too afraid to tell him how this looks, or he just doesn't care? I mean, what do you think's going on behind the scenes?
Well, thankfully, President Obama is recording all of his conversations in the Oval Office and the executive. No, I'm kidding.
We'll get to find out later, right?
Someday would be,
the most open and
someday we'll
transparent.
know, right? But not with precision. I think there's probably, as usual, amongst the top echelon of the president's communications team, some dispute as to whether this is something that urgently needs to be stopped, the vacation, or something that should continue. There is an argument for continuing in the sense that saying that some people criticized Jimmy Carter for, during the 1980 campaign, having what was called a Rose Garden campaign. He wasn't leaving the White House because he said he was going to remain there until the hostages came home from Iran. And you don't want to make the president look hostage to events. You want to make it seem
right.
as if he's going to carry on his normal activities, and golf, in this president's case, happens to be one of them.
Interesting.
It's remarkable to me, and you don't have to comment, James, because I try to keep you out of our very strong opinions here on the mornings.
Swamp of your opinion.
But it is to suggest that he has is tone deaf to the optics of this is pretty remarkable, considering image is so important to this president. It's how he won his election. I mean, he more than any other politician should understand how these optics affect his image and
well,
and
Larry, you mentioned it earlier that there are even members of the president's own party critical of this. We saw some extraordinary reporting from the New York Times this week based on, they said, interviews with dozens of officials and Democratic lawmakers and consultants and so forth, that there's a real rift between the president and his own party these days. That even though at the beginning of the second term, the White House Chief of Staff, Dennis McDonough, launched a celebrated charm offensive at that time to repair frayed relations between the White House and the Capitol Hill Democrats, today that relationship stands at its frostiest. They began with an interesting anecdote involving Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell visiting the Oval Office, and Harry Reid, the top Democrat in the Senate, telling President Obama right there, this was in June, that something needed to be done to stop GOP obstruction of the president's own nominees and appointments and ambassadors in the Senate. And the president blithely dismissed this right in front of Mitch McConnell, saying, "You and Mitch work it out."
Wow.
And that Harry Reid seethed for days about this, and that it was evidence of the president's, again, his detachment and his coolness. Sometimes perhaps not working to his
he's not
favor
hands-on with Congress, that's for sure.
All right, James,
right.
we got to roll. By the way, you're a huge Beatles fan. Are you okay with Paul McCartney working with Kanye West, apparently? What if he shows up on The Kardashians?
This is unanswerable, I say to you.
All right, James, have a great weekend.